Chief Superintendent Mifsud, thank you for agreeing to speak to us about this matter. We'd just like to ask you firstly about any preparation that the RGP has done or will be doing for the new maritime regulations.
Well, the marine protection regulations came into force at the end of October. Is a new piece of legislation, obviously, which governs a whole range of issues on the maritime side of things. So, as far as the RGP is concerned, what we're doing is we're internalising it and understanding what the legislation brings with it. But the point needs to be made, of course, that the legislation is pretty specific to the enforcement side of things. And the lead agency is clearly the Department of the Environment through the Wildlife Wardens, which will be appointed.
How do you anticipate working with the Wildlife Wardens and the Department of the Environment?
There's already been conversations between the Department of the Environment and ourselves, obviously, as you would expect. In terms of how we see this panning out, as I've said, the legislation is pretty specific as to who the enforcers of this are, and that is the Wildlife Wardens. So we would expect them to take the lead in prosecuting offenders. Hopefully people will comply with the licensing regime, and there will be very little need to enforce. And the police will be there to support them, to facilitate that task. Should they come across individuals who become obstructive, then obviously police officers have the power to arrest those individuals and allow the Wildlife Wardens to do their jobs. Clearly there may be occasions where the Wildlife Wardens see that there is a need to arrest an individual. Obviously they haven't got powers of arrest, which is when they would call upon the RGP to assist and exercise the constabulary powers.
Do you think this marks a move away from the way that things have been done in respect of the Nature Protection Act and the enforcement thereof? I think that it's fair to say that the public has looked to the RGP to enforce the Nature Protection Act so far. Does this mark a move away from that, and for what reason?
Well, I can't answer the reason. I think that's a question best posed to government, who are the legislators. As far as whether it's a move away, it definitely is a move away, but only insofar as the marine protection regulations are concerned. Clearly, we still have a locus in the Nature Protection Act and an enforcement responsibility there. What it does is it provides clarity. Clarity, and it allows people who understand this environment, excuse the pun, to deal with those types of offences. People who will no doubt be trained in their particular field. So what it does is it clarifies who the lead agency is in this regard. But of course, the RGP stands ready to assist and facilitate the role of our new-to-be colleagues in the enforcement world.
Do you anticipate there being teething problems?
Undoubtedly. There is the new legislation needs to be given time to embed itself. This is the first time that we have had a licensing regime in place for this. Which is very much welcomed by practitioners of the sport. I know I have seen interviews with some of the leading elements in the various clubs, and it's been a long battle for them, and they are no doubt welcoming of this new legislation and the regime that is imposed by it. So, are there going to be teething problems? Yes, there will be, undoubtedly, as indeed with any major piece of legislation, which this is, and certainly it's a change in focus, it's a change in emphasis, and change management is always difficult. So people will need to get used to fishing with a license rather than fishing, as happens now.
You have referenced there the Nature Protection Act as remaining part of what the RGP has to enforce. can you talk to us about the controversial area of, or the controversial subject that is fishing with nets, and what the RGP's approach to enforcing that is?
Okay. Well, the RGP's approach, not just with this, but across the range, is that, you know, we are always keen to have prevention through engagement. So what we want to do, and what we have been doing, is engaging with people, engaging with stakeholders to ensure that there is prevention rather than having to detect and enforce. And that is where we ordinarily come from across the board. Obviously, you know, the landscape has changed with the new legislation, and we will need to see how this pans out, how it embeds itself, and then we will need to determine how and what steps to take once this new legislation has embedded itself. You know, let's not forget, this is a completely different environment. It imposes a licensing regime. I know that it hasn't been extended to the nets, but everything is changing, and things, I think, need to embed themselves. They need to settle down. We won't be idle. We will obviously continue with our policing style, but with an eye on seeing how things pan out, so that we can determine how best to deal with issues arising from the Nature Protection Act in future. Together with every other business area that we have to deal with.
But in the here and now, can you just clarify how the RGP enforces the issue of fishing with nets today?
The standard protocol at the moment is to approach challenge the behaviour and ensure that it does not continue, and instructing the vessel to move away. I think it's important to note that we make no distinction through nationality. You know, the law makes no distinctions. So whether it's a local or whether it's another EU national or non-EU national, our approach will be the same. So that, in essence, is what we do, and this was made public by the Commissioner when he was interviewed several months ago in Talk About Town.
And very finally, you have, I think it's fair to say, come under criticism from some quarters of society who have questioned why the RGP takes a lenient approach to this enforcement. And I suppose the question is, do you feel that perception in any way undermines the work that the RGP does, not just in this sector, but as you hinted at earlier, the multitude of different business areas that you have responsibility for?
No, is the short answer. Slightly more developed answer is that we give credit to our community. Our community is a pretty intelligent community, and I'm sure that they recognise that just because there is one business area of the whole range of business areas which deals with anything from counter-terrorism through serious criminality to domestic violence to protecting our children. For one business area where we are subject to criticism, there is an awful lot more good that the RGP does, and our community is intelligent, as I say, and they recognise that just because one business area may not perceptionally be functioning as a minority would wish it to be, that everything else that we do suffers as a result. I think it's also important to note that we recognise the frustrations of individuals, but we also have frustrations of individuals who live in housing estates. We also have frustrations of people who are suffering antisocial behaviour. We also have frustrations of people who suffer domestic violence. For the RGP, policing the environment is one area of our business. We have a whole range that we need to deal with. We have a whole range of competing demands. And whilst we recognise the frustrations that appear in the various areas and deal with them as we are able to, when everything is taken holistically, I think we'll do a pretty good job.
Chief Superintendent Mifsud, thank you ever so much for your time.
You're welcome, John. Thank you.